without further ado, I am going to introduce New York City Councilmember Ben Kallos. He's going to tell you more about measures that he's introducing to protect New York City residents from pesticide exposure. So the Honorable Ben Kallos, of New York City Councilmember, was elected in 2013 to represent the Upper East Side, Midtown East, Roosevelt Island, and East Harlem, along with all 8.4 million New Yorkers in the New York City Council. In his current term of 2018 to 2021, as chair of the Subcommittee on Planning, Dispositions, and Concessions, he's focusing on preserving and building new affordable housing, overseeing every deal made by the city closely to ensure New Yorkers are actually getting the affordable housing they need. Councilmember Kallos is also working to empower communities in the planning process to create opportunities for minority and women-owned small businesses. Constituents are invited to join him in a conversation on the first Friday of each month, or he will go to them if they can gather 10 neighbors for Ben in your building. So if you're local, give Ben a call. So.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for all the great work.
Thank you.
Let's hear it for Sarah one more time. Thank you very much for your partnership. So that photo is actually from Earth Day that we did at PS 290. Sadly, I think I'm the only elected official in the city of New York who does something for Earth Day. So good afternoon. One more time, good afternoon. That is more like it. I'm Councilmember Ben Kallos. I represent 168,000 people on the Upper East Side, East Midtown, East Harlem, and Roosevelt Island. Thank you all for being here for the 37th National Pesticide Forum. For those who can't be here today, please consider sharing as much as you can. So you can tweet and Gram and Facebook me at Ben Kallos. Please use the hashtag for the conference, which is 37NPF. I want to start by thanking the organized partners, everyone dedicated to getting toxic pesticides out of our city's parks and away from our children. Please, a special thanks to Jay Feldman, CEO of Beyond Pesticides, for inviting me to speak today. Doug and Patty Wood of Grassroots Environmental Education for their tireless efforts in educating me, my staff, and the community to the dangers of the use of toxic pesticides, and the Sierra Club and their members who have testified publicly on this subject, Dr. Judith Weiss and Gusty Bogak. And perhaps saving the best for last, and I'm going to tell a little story, and she is the supporting actor in that story, Paula Ragovin, who dedicated a lifetime of service to educating kindergartners at PS 290, who is now playing a leadership role at New Yorkers for Pesticide-Free Parks. My story starts in 2014, my first year in office, when I went to visit kindergarten in my district to teach students in my district about civics and local government. Little did I know that it was the kindergarten who would be teaching me a lesson. I met Paula, who introduced me to her class. They gave me a presentation dressed as a panoply of fruits and vegetables that you might find in a garden, warning me of the dangers of toxic pesticides and extolling the virtues of nature's pesticides. I thought the kids were pretty precocious for 5-year-olds and invited them to visit me at City Hall. Later that year, they did indeed visit. They got to see a statue of George Washington and even his desk. But as it turns out, they were there really just to see me, and perhaps the youngest and toughest advocate City Hall has ever seen. In the chambers of City Hall, they began to chant, "Ban toxic pesticides, use only nature's pesticides." So I'm going to ask you to please join me in that chant 3 times. Paula can help lead. Ban toxic pesticides, use only nature's pesticides. Ban toxic, use only nature's pesticides. Ban toxic pesticides, use only nature's pesticides. And then they concluded with Pass a law. And I don't think, yes, she deserves. It's the only legislation I know of with its own theme song. And I don't think anyone could say no to Paula, let alone her students. And after all, I do work for my students, even if they're not old enough to vote yet. And I said I would do my very best. Now, that's when the hard part started. It turns out that this fight had already begun back in 2005 when then Environmental Protection Chair Councilmember James Gennaro passed Local Law 37. The law banned toxic pesticides in city-owned and leased land. Unfortunately, it turns out that some pesticides known to be hazardous, including glyphosate, were not included in this law. In fact, at the time that we were drafting this, EPA found glyphosate to, quote, not likely to be carcinogenic to humans. But in 2015, as all of you know, the International Agency for Research on Cancer of the World Health Organization also classified glyphosate as a carcinogen, and within a week of that declaration, we introduced Intro 800, also known as 0800, on the heels of that finding. Paula and her students and advocates around the city went to work badgering 51 council members to get 34 sponsors, which would force a hearing on the vital legislation. Despite our best efforts over 2.5 years of trying, we could only get 20 sponsors on the legislation. Thankfully, our then Health Committee Chair and now Speaker Corey Johnson heard the legislation even without enough support to pass. In 2017, hundreds of grade school students descended on City Hall. They, along with doctors, scientists, and other experts, testified about the harm of glyphosate and the risks it posed to our environment. They called security, but there were too many of the kids, and they got to do whatever they wanted. They did a great skit. It's actually worth watching online, and they made ABC, CBS, NBC. We had great. The kids stole the show, I'm going to be honest. They also had a great presentation. We also had some experts. Something you should know about me is I believe in climate change. I believe in the scientific method. I believe in making hypotheses and testing those hypotheses and seeing whether they can be reproduced in other environments. And I believe in evidence-based policy making and having experts testifying on peer-reviewed science. And so I was so grateful to have Eric Weltman from Food and Water Watch testify that despite the number of studies revealing the harm of glyphosate poses to the environment, the U.S. still regulates glyphosate largely based on an initial study concluding that the formula was, quote, particularly non-toxic. Yet another expert who testified, Jordan Christensen from Citizens Campaign for the Environment, stated that a growing body of scientific research had linked exposure to pesticides with certain cancers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He also stated that children are particularly vulnerable to these toxins even, and here's the scary part, even at low levels. The only safe amount of glyphosate that can be used to ensure our children's and our family's safety is 0. No amount of glyphosate is safe. No amount of toxic pesticides is safe. I will say that starting with this education I got from these kindergartners, I learned a lot at this hearing. And what I will say is, as a new parent, I have a 14-month at home, and the first time she got to touch a lawn was not in New York City. Because as a new parent, any folks who have been parents or new parents in the room, can I just see a show of hands? As you know, everything goes in the mouth. And I am petrified to bring my daughter to Central Park. I can see out the window beautiful grass, but I know it's covered in toxic pesticides. And it means that my daughter can't play and that children shouldn't play. And worse yet, now when I walk around the neighborhood, they have these signs. Hold on. It's probably about this big. It's probably a sign this big at the entrance to a park, and it'll say that there's been pesticides sprayed there. It might also say that there's rat poison. It might have a whole list of poisons there, and it's this big, and so you have to find the right entrance to find the right place. And the other piece was folks were not able to testify about how long it takes for those pesticides to be removed from the environment once they're sprayed. And so I've only been able to, my sister lives down in Florida, and when we visit, my daughter gets to play on her lawn because she only uses organic and nature-based pesticides, if they use pesticides at all, and the homeowners association is upset, but whatever. Her lawn is actually the best in the neighborhood. Now, since then, a number of U.S. cities have already banned glyphosate on land they oversee, and I think New York City should be the next city to do it. So every Earth Day, it's an important day for me. I want to make sure I leave this planet better than I found it for my daughter. We're reintroducing an improved version of Intro 0800 to finally eliminate glyphosate and other poisonous substances from our parks once and for all. New York City has relied too much on toxic pesticides. In 2016, glyphosate was applied over 1,000 times by the NYC Parks Department, and that's just not right. The purpose of our new bill is to prohibit city agencies and contractors from applying pesticides, synthetic or otherwise, that are found likely to be carcinogen by the EPA, the California Office of Environmental Health, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer at the World Health Organizations. Cities have a duty to protect people from unnecessary pesticide exposure, and I take that responsibility seriously. The legislation will put New York City at the forefront nationally of addressing this important issue. The proposed legislation focuses on utilizing biological pesticides, which are derived from naturally occurring substances as opposed to synthetic substances. There's a general acceptance that biological pesticides are usually inherently less toxic than the conventional counterparts. In addition, with respect to conventional pesticides, biological pesticides are often more effective targeting a specific pest, can be used in smaller quantities, and break down in the environment more rapidly. Further, the bill adds measures to prevent harmful pesticides from contaminating water systems by preventing synthetic pesticides from being sprayed within 75 feet of a natural body of water. Annually, the list of pesticides that can and can't be used on city property based on EPA, WHO, and California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard will be updated to reflect the most up-to-date information. Due to our utmost commitment to ensuring public safety, legislation will permit a limited number of exceptions where conventional pesticides may still be used for highly targeted purposes, but only for a period of 14 days. And I also believe it will hopefully be more targeted to places that children and adults do not and would not be expected to play. In the past, municipalities and cities have the excuse that they did not know about the potential harmful effects of these chemicals. We do not have an excuse anymore. We are aware of what the potential consequences can be. And just days ago, the New York Times reported that a California man, Edwin Hardiman, 70, was awarded $80 million after he sued Monsanto, arguing that after using Roundup on his property for 26 years, the weed killer caused his cancer. The jury issued an initial verdict saying that the weed killer was a substantial factor in causing Mr. Hardiman's cancer. If that court had enough evidence and courage to rule in favor of this man, New York City should have the same courage to. Let's rule in favor of protecting our children. To sum up, New York City must ban the use of toxic pesticides. This issue is one that affects our children and our children's children. As Dr. Lori Hopner, a professor at SUNY Downstate School of Public Health, testified in 2017, this issue of pesticide exposure sticks with me because it sticks to my children. Every day we delay action is another child exposed. So the ask is, we're going to introduce for Earth Day, it'll be in on April 18th, and I'm asking each and every one of you to help get the hearing. We need 34 sponsors to force a hearing. Last time we only got to 20. Now Corey Johnson now is the speaker. He heard it previously, and so he may be predisposed. But even then, if we don't have 26 sponsors, I don't know how we get it voted. I'll be even more honest. The Parks Department opposes this. They just do not want to do it, and it's a problem because they're supposed to be creating safe places for our children to play. So I'll take a couple of questions, but my question to you beforehand is, I'll just see just a show of hands. Who will promise to leave no stone unturned and call their council member every day until they get them to sponsor this legislation? Can I see a show of hands? I really want to see every hand. I won't take questions till I see every single hand, because the only way we're going to get this done is together. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate all you're doing and your leadership. It's phenomenal. So yeah, you'll take some questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go with 3 because I have to be off the stage in 5 minutes. So the gentleman in the coat, the person in the blue vest, and the person in the white, and that'll be the 3. If you don't get a chance to ask me any questions, I'm going to introduce you to Wilfredo. He's going to stand up and wave. You can email him at policy@benkallos.com. If you can share your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
Intentions are really good. The bill does not fulfill your intentions, okay? This bill is basically a green light for the city continuing what they're doing. You have to work on the wording. You talked about California levels of their determination of cancer levels. That's not in the bill. You left it out. You're just leaving it in terms of their neurotoxicity, okay?
Sure. Wilfredo? Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Second,
We're gonna get you a copy of the new bill before we introduce it.
I believe I have the latest, this copy, we got something about a week ago.
Okay.
So I think that.
So we'll work with you and make sure that we have the tightest law in the country.
That's very, very important because it basically, it doesn't change any of the determination. EPA is backtracking, you know, we can't depend on EPA anymore. Number 2 is that you can't have the exceptions of playing fields, golf courses, and water and swimming pools. That's where pesticides are used the most.
Okay.
In golf courses, it's 40 to 50 times more pesticides used around the tee range that they do in agriculture. People are getting sick and ill using that. Part of the problem with New York City has been too lax professional playing fields. New York City Council allowed Yankee Stadium to be built, taking away parkland, promising it back to the community. That parkland was never given back. So I think it's really important not to give the exception to sports and playing fields. I don't know where, you know.
We'll connect with you afterwards. Wilfredo will come over to you if I can take questions from the other folks.
Okay. But I just want to say, this bill, where is it the way it is? Because it's basically a green light for
you
Parks
have
Department, okay? And the Parks Department...
Sir, you have an advanced copy of the legislation because we're working with a lot of the advocates in this room to try to make everybody happy. Sometimes not everyone agrees, but you have knowledge that everyone else doesn't. Wilfredo will connect with you. We will work with you on the line level edits and try to get to legislation that you can do. If you oppose doing anything, that's fine.
No, we don't oppose to do anything, but I just want to say...
But we would
I
hope
just
to
want to
just
take the
be
floor for
able
1
to
second.
work with you on the sentence level edits.
We're the ones that made the city change, stop the West Nile virus spraying, okay? In that bill the city council passed, they had the exemption. The exemption was pushed 7 years in a row to allow the spraying to take place.
Joe, I mean,
Okay,
we
I
have a
understand.
look, we have a commitment on the table to discuss all these issues. So you're a tremendous advocate and you do it really well. So I think the council member has stated very clearly that he's going to listen to everything that you have to say and others in the room has to say, and that's why he's here, to get this feedback. So,
This is not new, Jay.
yeah.
Saying it over and over again.
Okay, so let's Doug Wood did an analysis of the bill. We'll sit down with him and go over these points that you're raising. But I think the important thing here, guys, is that we have a legislator who is committed to doing the right thing. It's always a process of, you know this better than I do, it's always a process of working at the exact language. We are in that process. The point is there's an intent and spirit here that is in alignment with what we're all about. So we look forward to working with you and continue to work with you on this. So there are 2 other questions.
Yes, and the blue vest.
Okay, this is quick. How can I find out who are the 20 co-sponsors and therefore who is not, so I can get on having people reach out?
As soon as we get a bill number, we will circulate it, and it will be live on the internet. And if you actually want folks to sign on pre-introduction, you can just call their office already and say, reach out to Ben's office, we want you on pre-introduction even before there's a bill number. Wilfredo, do we have an LS number for people to use? If you call your legislator and say, please sign on to LS 229, that is the temporary number until the 18th, when it will be more public. If you are an advocate who is helping us draft the pre-introduction language, we can make sure you get a copy of that language. We're just trying to make everybody happy. In the white.
So I'm actually from the Boston area. My name is Ellen Fine. I work on a little project called Healthy Yards Needham. And I'm going to suggest to my friends in New York, like, don't all jump on me on this one, that maybe we do this like great Boston-New York rivalry on our parks thing, and that we work really together, but almost like in this little competition to like up each other, not necessarily up each other, but like you guys point to the Rose Kennedy Greenway going all organic for several years. And then we point back to New York City going, you know, organic in Central Park. And do you see what I'm saying? And then we play and work together, and so that we can really create some momentum together. But it'll look like a Red Sox, weren't they the last ones to win the World Series? Yankees rivalry, so.
I love the idea. Thank you. I just want to, again, thank all of you for being here on a weekend. I want to thank Paula for educating her kindergartners so that they could educate me. I want to thank so many of the experts in this room, as well as people from the Academy of Sciences who have educated me on this issue. I want to thank Jay and just all of you, because I think I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can about this. I learned about this issue. I'm relying on your expertise, and I know that not everyone in the room agrees on stuff, but my goal is to work with you, listen to you, and ultimately the one thing I'll leave you with is, if you haven't introduced legislation by kindergarten, you might be an underachiever. Thank you.